We're living our truth now. Krista, what?
Krista who?
Twisted Delphian?
Did you say Christian Dolphin? So are you from Philadelphia?
Welcome to the Life After Leaving Podcast, an ex-Christadelphian podcast. Hello, heathens. Today I am here with Heather. Heather is actually the first ex-Christadelphian that I connected with. I think we've been friends for like 5 years now, mostly virtually since we found each other. So I wanted her to be my first guest on the podcast. So please welcome Heather.
Hello.
Hello. All right. So thank you for coming on today. Thanks for being my first guest and being patient with me as I figure all this out. I'm very glad to have you here, and I'm ready to hear your story. And what's funny is you've actually already kind of shared it, haven't you?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for letting me be your first guest. It's great to be on this podcast. I did kind of share my story online already on a blog, but that was probably, 5 or 6 years ago at this point. So,
Oh, I actually thought it might have been even earlier than that.
I actually don't even know. I feel like time is meaningless to me nowadays, so it was a while ago.
Right. Well, let's start with a few numbers to get us oriented.
Yes.
I'm curious about roughly how many years you're in the Christadelphians, if you were born and raised, if you joined, by your own choice when you're older.
Yep.
What was that for you?
Yeah, so my family has been in the Christadelphians for probably like 5 generations. I mean, as far back as I'm aware, I don't know the story of how they got into it, but I just know that like my great grandparents were all Christadelphians. So I was born into it. It wasn't really a choice that I made. It was just the way that we were. So I grew up going to meeting and Sunday school and Bible class and all those fun things. We lived in southeastern Pennsylvania, so we went to the Bucks County Ecclesia for the first like maybe 10 years of my life. And then we started going to Morristown. And so we were in Morristown for like maybe 5 years or so. And then my family actually moved up to Vermont. So we were part of the Green Mountain Ecclesia for several years. And then when I became an adult, I moved down to Connecticut and became a member of the Meriden Ecclesia. So I was in 4 different ecclesias over the course of my time there.
Yeah, you really put in some time. You were traveling. You were meeting people.
Yeah, I was getting around. And so to answer your question of how long I was in, when I officially left, I was 24. And it was actually exactly 20 years ago. It was August 2004 that I wrote.
Wow, happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yes, I was like, I should celebrate. I didn't realize the other day I was looking at my journals to see like, when did I actually leave? And yeah, it was August 2004. I wrote my letter, I sent it in, and I was like, yay, I'm done. They didn't accept my letter right away, but according to my personal records, I was out at that point.
Okay, we're definitely going to loop back to that because that is wild that there's like, no.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you for sharing. So you're kind of all over northeastern North America because Christadelphians are worldwide. So I do just kind of want to do like a regional kind of basis for everyone so we know what part of the world you are if your accent doesn't give you away. If anyone hasn't realized already, we're in America over here. And were you a baptized member at the time of your leaving at 24?
Yes. I got baptized when I was 15 years old in Morristown.
Okay. So you're in that big tub.
Yes, the one that was like cosplaying as a closet most of the time and then came down as a tub when needed.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they put a curtain rod in there, they could have hung all the baptismal like robes in there.
Right.
That's what it looked like. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so tell me, what were some things that stuck out to you about your childhood as a Christadelphian? Is there anything that kind of came to mind when I brought up this podcast of like what was like life, whether it's as a kid or a teenager?
I mean, my childhood as a Christadelphian was actually pretty sweet. Like I really liked the social aspect of it. Bucks County was a really small ecclesia, and it was like maybe like 4 or 5 families that made it up. And it so happened that there were 2 other girls like around my age that went there at the same time. So they were like pretty much my best friends as a kid. And so, going to Sunday school, going to Bible class was always like a social activity for me. So it was fun. And then every summer we would go to Bible school at Shippensburg Bible School. It was held at the Shippensburg University.
It was Mid-Atlantic Christadelphian Bible School.
Yes, MACBS, baby.
Yeah.
Yes, so that was like the highlight of my year, from, I don't know how young I started really getting into it, but I mean, I have memories of doing craft projects as like probably like a 4 or 5-year-old at Shippensburg with, I don't know if we want to name names of people, but
I don't know if it's safe.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I remember doing stuff like that, and then being a teenager there and like, flirting with the boys after dark and all the fun antics we would get up to.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that it was overall a pretty positive experience. And again, I think that kind of makes it interesting, again, that here we are on this podcast. So obviously long term, something changed there. But I think it's interesting to see where you came from and what kind of experience you had, because every Christadelphian, depending on what ecclesia you're in, what age you are, what gender you are, all of that, like you said, fortunately there were girls your age, but if there hadn't been, I'm sure it would have been a really different experience for you.
Yeah, that's true.
And ecclesias can certainly really vary in size. I know one ecclesia that was like one family. So it was, would have been very hard to have been in that one. Yeah, the Telford ecclesia, that's like,
oh, right.
It's kind of generous calling it ecclesia when it's like one family.
I was going to say, like, don't you have to at least have like 2 or 3 to make it an ecclesia?
I think there's like a couple that sometimes came over. And so that was like, they're like, oh, it's 2 families. I'm like, they don't always come.
Yeah, that was like when we moved up to Vermont, the Green Mountain Ecclesia was basically, I think it was just 3 families. It was us. It was the family that we actually lived with when we moved up there. And then there was a 3rd family up in northern Vermont. So we didn't even get together with them every Sunday. Like it was a once in a while kind of get together thing.
I guess that kind of makes sense. And all the more important, I guess, that your family focused on the Bible schools so that they could have that community. So do you want to comment anything on your baptism? Because usually that's a pretty pivotal moment for Christadelphians when they kind of take that commitment step where that's really where they officially join the group.
Yes. Yeah. So it's kind of maybe a little embarrassing to admit this, but the reason that I got baptized when I did was I felt sort of like peer pressure about it because, well,
I had a feeling that's what you were going to say.
Well, maybe let me rewind a little bit. So we were going to Morristown at that point, and there was only 3 of us in my Sunday school class. One of them was your cousin. Actually, the other one might be your cousin too, but a little more distant.
Yeah, I was kind of related to everyone around there. We're not dropping names, but they know me.
Yeah, we all know each other there.
Yeah, I think we're actually cousins-in-law, if that's a thing. I don't know if it is.
Yeah, I guess if we connected by marriage, we would be. But then again, like the entirety of Christadelphia is probably connected in that way.
Yeah, if they get into genealogy, they're going to find some weird stuff potentially.
Oh yeah, it's going to be like curly Q's and knots and
loops. There's like some overlaps randomly. Like I still can't get over, some of my family ones where they ended up in the same ecclesia, married to the same family. Like what?
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
Yeah, it's awkward.
All right. Anyways, back to your baptism.
Yeah. So there was only 3 of us in Sunday school, and we were all like maybe a year apart. The one that was older than me, she got baptized. I think she was like 13 when she got baptized, but she was a little older than me, so I was like, whatever. But then the one that was younger than me decided that he was going to get baptized.
Oh, that's also kind of young for the guys. Often they're a little later than the girls.
Well, this particular guy is really into it, and I think he still is. So the story was, one night I'm at home, the phone rings, I pick it up, I hear it's this kid's mother, and she's telling my father that her son wants to get baptized. And she's kind of like a little bit panicked about it. Like, oh, wow, this is coming sooner than I thought, right? But also excited. And I guess like at the time, like what they would do, and maybe they still do, is there was like a booklet or something that you would sort of study to like prepare
I think
for baptism.
That was the case. I think I got that too.
Yeah. And so I guess they were like, okay, we'll go through this booklet with him and he'll be fine, whatever. So he got baptized. I know he was like 13 at that point, but he might have been 14 when he got baptized. But I was like a year older than him. So I was like kind of panicked. I'm like, oh man, if he's getting baptized before me, like, what does that mean about me? So pretty much immediately I went to my parents and I was like, I want to get baptized. And they were like, come on, like, we know you're totally doing this because
They called you out.
well, I mean, not specifically, but I know now that they were probably like, come on, girl. But it looked good for them too. So they were like, okay, we'll do it.
Which
so
is
I went
an
through
interesting little bit to add is, well, it made them look good.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean to like throw my parents under the bus like that, but
in general, there's like a status symbol associated with it that I'm sure will come up periodically just throughout this whole series. But I think that's safe to say.
Like they did the right
they
thing.
Raised you well.
Me.
Like it's like a thing, like a compliment to them almost that you took that step.
Yeah. And that was actually like a little bit less than a year before we moved up to Vermont. And not to like spoiler alert, but eventually my parents would leave. And so I feel like they might have already kind of been thinking about that maybe. And maybe
that would actually be interesting if they were.
Right, but maybe didn't want to like be out about it yet. So the fact that I was getting baptized was kind of like, I don't know. Not. But
I'm curious because they didn't say anything though, did they? Like
no.
Maybe wait a year.
No, not at all. They were like, all right. Well, because I remember I actually wanted to do it in Vermont because I was like, oh, we could do it like at the water hole or like out in a stream.
In a fresh brook.
Exactly. I was like, won't it be so like bucolic if I get baptized in a stream, a babbling brook?
I'm just going to say it's going to be cold. That's my feedback.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
The snow just melted and you'd be like, yeah, it's a great time for baptism.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I thought it would be really cool, but they were like, no, we should do it here because we don't want to like give the wrong impression.
And indoors also.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was September when I got baptized, so the water would have been warm from the summer, I guess. But anyway.
Okay, that's fair.
So, long story short, I ended up getting baptized in September. It was September 3rd, 1995, if anyone's keeping track. And what I will say about it is that I was excited about it, and I really hoped that it was going to be like a spiritual experience. Like I really was like, up until that point, I felt like I hadn't really had, I don't know, any kind of spiritual feelings. Like I would see other people get emotional at baptisms and cry or like things like that. And I was always like, I don't get it. Like I'm not feeling those things.
I'm curious, did you ever have the Bible school high?
Like when you come back from Bible school and you're like, I'm
going to read my Bible every day now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hardcore now. I am so uplifted.
Yes. No, totally. I definitely had that kind of thing where I was like, I'm going to read my Bible every day. I'm going to pray 20 times a day. And I'm never going to say bad words or think about sex or do anything bad. Like,
not setting yourself up to fail at all.
Right.
Anywhere.
Well, yeah, because then like 2 days later you would mess up and then feel horrible about it. Anyway, so I was like, oh, maybe when I get baptized, like maybe this will finally be some sort of like transcendental moment where I'm like, oh, when I come out of the water, right?
I mean, I could kind of see that based on the way it's hyped up and you're wearing a white robe and all of your sins have been forgiven. So I would assume it would feel pretty damn good to be sinless. Like I want to lose 5 pounds because that was so much sin weighing me down.
Right.
Like measure me before and after once I'm dry, maybe, because you're very heavy in that robe.
I know. No, but like that was the other thing too, is like you're 15 years old or 13 years old or however old you are. You do not have any sin. Like you think you do because you're told your whole freaking life that you're like a terrible sinful person. But
which, to be fair, kids are learning how to be nice. Like it's not, they have to learn in practice.
I know, but like you haven't committed like crimes,
they haven't committed like mail fraud, insurance fraud. They haven't stolen, from their employers or anything.
Right.
Like they're just children.
I mean, they might have lied or they might have like, stolen some cookies from the cookie jar or something. But like,
what were the stakes there? Like,
right. What had I done? What had I done?
There's a lot less of the intention that comes from adulthood where your brain is, like they say, fully developed and you're really making choices and you're developing a character. And so it's like, okay, what choices are you making based on your character and your morals? Mm-hmm. Like as a kid, your morals are just whatever your parents told you they should be. And you just try to obey as much as you can to stay out of trouble.
Well, and that was the thing is like, I mean, like I said, I hadn't sinned unless you consider like, I don't know, stealing food out of the closet or I don't know, like stupid things, like
or like thinking a bad thought. You're like, I'm so evil.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. I thought I was very sinful because I had like dirty thoughts or like, when I was babysitting the kids down the street, I would try to watch like the pay-per-view channels after they went to bed. And
Or just thinking like, I'm so mad at my siblings and stuff. I feel like,
Oh
where you're just like,
yeah,
they
right.
fight. Like if you have siblings, you guys fight and you're mad at each other. And like, is just being angry a sin? Because it feels like it,
Right.
when you're growing up, like the way it's
Yeah.
treated.
Yeah, any kind of negative feeling was like a bad thing, like you shouldn't be having it.
Yeah, I think that's also going to come up in different
Oh yeah, that's a
episodes.
theme. That's a theme in my life too. So anyway, to continue the baptism story, I mean, I pretty clearly remember that day. Like it was very exciting to be like the center of attention. And it was just me. Like I know sometimes people do it like with their friends or they'll have like a couple people get baptized at the same time, but it was just me that day. So it was all about me.
Do you want to paint a picture for us what that's like to be baptized as a Christadelphian, at least in the Morristown Ecclesia, like what your experience was?
Sure. I mean, I remember it was, I had like a new dress that I was going to wear, and
Cute.
Graham got me a head covering, a nice head covering. Obviously, I wasn't wearing it yet because you can't wear it until you get baptized.
But was it lace or yarn?
It was lace.
Okay, want to know. Thank you.
I have a picture somewhere. Well, I guess we're not showing pictures on the podcast, but I can
if you want to give it to me, if you really feel like you want to, I'll put it on the socials.
Maybe, we'll see. What I remember is that I think it was like during the Sunday school hour. Like we didn't have Sunday school that day, and so we went in, and I think there was like a little bit of a introduction, and we sang some hymns, and then everybody sung hymns while I went downstairs and I put on my bathing suit, and then I put on this like terry cloth. I feel like it was terry cloth. Maybe it wasn't. It was like a white robe. I feel like
it was made of like what towels are made of.
Yes.
Like that heavy towel material. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I went down into the extremely tiny little bathroom that was in the basement in Morristown.
In contrast to the baptismal tub.
Yeah. I know. I should have gotten changed in there. And then, so the way the basement was at Morristown, first of all, it was like potentially life-threatening to get down the stairs because they were like ancient, tiny.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, tiny, narrow
stairs.
Steps.
Steep. Yeah.
Because how old was that building? It was like the 1800s or something.
It was literally an old schoolhouse, like a one-room schoolhouse. Mm-hmm. I don't know the whole history, but it was a very odd building that, like, I feel like it would take a lot to fully bring it up to code. It probably has like historical grandfathering into those stairs.
Well, I thought you were going to say it was going to take a lot to explain the building, and I was like, yeah, why are we getting into the building?
No, I just want to get a picture because some people who, if they are a new listener, they may not have ever witnessed a Christadelphian baptism. They also just so that to paint a picture of what it's like. But I guess I want to loop back down to how it was almost theater seating in the basement.
Yes.
So you had 2 levels of people watching you.
Yes. Oh my God, that was so weird.
There was the front row splash zone on the basement's like sub level. I don't even know what you call it. Like there's like a lower level.
I know, it was like there's the deep end.
Yeah. There was stairs down to like this deeper area. And then there was like the very low ceiling area where you like anyone over 5'10" couldn't walk without like having to dip their head down.
Everyone had to hunch over. Yeah.
Yeah. And somehow the tallest men all went out of that ecclesia. Like,
I know.
It was so ironic.
Yeah.
But so then there was like a little kitchen at the end of this lower, or the lower ceiling level before you went to like down the stairs to the sub level.
Yep.
And there was just like an open balcony. And so you just have dozens of people viewing you from the kitchen up above. And so you come out and they're just everywhere.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for setting the scene, because that was what I distinctly remember of that day was so after I got changed into the terry cloth robe and I went down into the deeper part of the basement, there's like the tank, which I don't even know if was it like a cattle trough or something? Like it was like a huge rectangular metal.
Good question. I've never got an answer. I always thought that it looked like there was supposed to be a door on it. Like I thought there used to be hinges on the side, and I always thought like this was something else and we've repurposed it.
Well, it had like I feel like it had doors on the outside of it to like make it blend into the landscape when it wasn't being used, because they would turn it.
Someone was trying to hide it.
Yeah, like they would turn it up on the foot
weird.
So that it was like a tall, like it looked like a cabinet kind of.
It was like a 9-foot tall cabinet, basically.
Yeah. I don't know what that actually was, but I remember it was like metal on the inside.
Yeah, it was like a big metal bucket, but 9 feet tall and like 3 or
and
4
like 3
feet wide. Yeah, it was.
I don't think it was 4 feet wide. That would have been huge.
It was big though. I don't know.
It was.
Maybe someone will measure it and send it to us once they
I know,
realize
like
we
how
put
many
this out. Like
how many gallons
facts.
of water? How many gallons of water did it hold? Because it must have taken them forever to fill it up.
I remember distinctly my actual biological uncle filling it up for me, and him like sweetly measuring it with his arm and like showing me how he filled it with the hose. Like he was so proud of it. He was just so happy to be filling it for me. I was like, thank you.
That's cute. Well, yeah, so mentioning your uncle reminds me that, it was a special day, and I had picked my Uncle Bob to be the one to give the
Yeah.
lecture.
You
and
get
then,
to choose who gives a talk about you. So that's
Yeah.
another thing. It's like, it's your day. It's like your birthday all over
Yeah,
again.
it totally is. I mean, it's your spiritual birthday, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Again,
and I
happy
think,
anniversary.
thank you. I think it was my dad and my Uncle Bob at the tank. It was like 2 or 3 of them.
Well, you have 2 people usually next to you, right? When it happens? Like
Yeah.
2 of the brothers?
Yeah, because one of them holds your feet, and the other one guides your neck and head down.
Yeah, I think they like hold your sternum down or something.
No, I think they
I
didn't.
don't know what it is. It's your shoulders. I don't know. I don't remember anymore. I feel like they just make sure they like
Yeah, they just make sure
go
you
down.
totally submerge.
Yeah, you have to be completely immersed, which I hated.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me, the first time I saw a baptism, I was a kid, and I was really disappointed with how quickly it happened. Like, they basically just go down and then out again, and I was like, oh, they don't like hold them under for a little while.
I thought you were just going to mean about all the hype. Like, you're up there singing for 20 minutes. You guys are getting into it. There's a whole talk, and then the actual event. It's kind of like a wedding. When you go to a wedding, they've got all the vows and they've got all the years of planning.
Right.
And then you show up, and like in 15 minutes, it's like, I do, and you're like, oh, okay, great. Like, that was really fast.
I guess you've never been to a Catholic wedding, though.
I have not.
Yeah, those are quite long.
Just being to a Catholic service was enough for me.
Anyway, so I go down to the basement. I get in the tank. I'm sitting in the water, like partially, like my lower half of my body is submerged in the water. And I guess somebody must have gone upstairs and been like, she's ready. And then everyone files down the staircase of death, single file.
Holding hands, ideally, for safety.
Yeah. And I do remember my grandmother, I think she was in the splash zone. Probably my family. They were like in the front row right there.
That term catches on. Thank you.
I know. I'm picturing them like wearing like the ponchos that you can get for like made in the mist ponchos.
Yeah. The mist arises around you as you're holy now.
Yes. Yeah. So I remember like sitting there, and I felt like a little nervous, like I had a little butterfly kind of feelings, and I was like, this is it. This is my moment. And so I think
you do also have 100 people staring at you.
Yeah, everyone's looking at me. And I don't remember, like, I feel like there was something that they said, like, do you, Heather, take the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? I don't know.
Yeah, to be your lawfully wedded husband for the rest of your eternal days.
Something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, something about your sins are forgiven and you accept Jesus was kind of
there was
summary.
some kind of,
I don't know the wording. There's specific wording.
There was a spiel, yes.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I was like, And then they, like, dunked me, and I came back out of the water, and I just like looked at everybody just looking at me, right? And I just
strong eye contact.
Yeah. And I just started laughing. Like I started giggling because I was like,
really?
I was like, like everyone's looking at me, and I felt,
oh, that's so precious.
I know, but it also just gives you like a clue of like how freaking young I was. Like I wasn't.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be making like life-altering bonds with God at that age, like.
I think it was actually his dead son. So.
Oh yeah. But, I feel like I was like a little too young to make these commitments.
It's a big commitment, especially since it's constantly talked about as kind of like a marriage, like a pseudo marriage or like a template for marriage kind of thing.
No, it really is.
There's a strong association. So it's like, okay, she's wearing white,
Mm-hmm.
She's
the bride of Christ.
She's just a really damp bride.
But she's clean.
That's where we're at.
She's very
super clean. She has no sins. She's ready for Jesus.
No, so I guess everybody left at that point. And of course, it's like takes a while for everyone to file out of that room. So you're just like sitting there in the tank.
Yeah, there's one staircase.
Yeah.
One person at a time going up or down. You cannot do both at the same time.
Right.
This is the smallest staircase you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah. And then I remember that terry cloth robe all of a sudden weighs 3,000 pounds because it's full of water.
That's why there's 2 men to help you, because they will help you get out of the tub with that weight.
I can't remember. I feel like maybe the robe came off and just like they wrung it out or whatever. Because I had my bathing suit underneath. Like I wasn't like.
I think I've blacked out that part. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't really recall. I just remember then going into the bathroom, the tiny, tiny bathroom again, and trying to get my dress back on and do something with my wet hair.
And now your hair is soaked and there is no hair dryer.
Yeah, your hair's soaked. And then I put on my little lace head covering, which would have been super cute if my hair wasn't soaking wet.
That is the downside. You're like, don't take my picture. We'll pretend it was next week.
Right. And then upstairs, everyone's singing hymns while they're waiting for you. So you can hear like, whoa, and there was a piano. Oh no, there was an organ too, right? Anyway, you can hear the
Yeah, there
music
was
and
an
you can hear the
organ.
singing, and everyone's like up there thinking about you, obviously. And then I think that was the end of that portion of it. And then we had like the memorial service as usual. And then it was just like the exhortation was for me.
And I remember also having to awkwardly sit in like the front row.
Yes, sitting all the way
because
up in the very
it was
front.
for me.
Yes. Yeah, and then of course everyone comes up to you after and they're like congratulating you and hugging you and welcoming you into the fold.
I also thought of one thing you missed.
What?
You took that unleavened bread
Oh,
for the first time,
yes.
and you were taking a little shot of wine.
Yes.
So at that time, I think it was a cup. They later went to the little wine glass shots.
Yeah, I don't remember when they
Shot
made that
glasses.
transition because I do remember drinking from a cup and being like, at that point, I was the first one
It
to
was
get it that day.
pre-COVID. Let's just
Oh
say
yeah,
that.
no, definitely.
I mean, we would never now, but
No,
it was there was 2 goblets that went on each
Yep,
side of the hall.
like silver goblets.
And everyone put their mouth on
Yep.
it and took a sip of wine, unless maybe I'm sure there was someone who pretended.
Yeah,
But I mean, they were taking the teeniest sips they could out of that
Right.
shared.
and like the further
goblet.
back in the room you were, the more disgusting it was when it got to you because there'd be like lipstick, there'd be like
Yeah.
there would be crumbs in the wine sometimes. Like ew. who
Yeah,
would-
did they do the bread first and then the wine? I think they did.
yeah, because
Yeah, so the breadcrumbs were in there.
Mhm.
Oh no. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that was I think they changed it because there was actually a disabled person that had trouble with the
Mm.
goblet and they didn't want them to knock over an entire goblet of
Oh,
wine.
yeah.
They had like a hand thing.
Okay.
So they switched it and they did like the little shot glasses
Yeah.
and they left some half full for that person
Oh, okay.
so that they wouldn't spill it with their hand.
Mhm.
And I think they also realized it was kind of gross.
Yeah. I don't remember if it was in Morristown or if it was by the time I was in Meriden. I know that I had both. I had the silver goblet experience, and then I also had like the tray with all the little plastic cups in it.
And did you ever have Cranston's wine?
Not that I remember. Why? What did they have?
They went out of their way to pick the worst tasting wine they
Oh,
could.
really?
It was like straight vinegar. And so every time you'd visit, you'd see people like psyching themselves up for the wine. Be like,
Oh wow.
Okay, great. and I was like, but isn't that a distraction? Because like now all I can think about is this wine and not like
And yeah.
my spiritual,
Yeah.
state right now.
Right.
Theirs was, that was rough. So that's why I mention it because I think you would still remember that wine to this day.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember liking any of the wine. Like, I remember it was always kind of like and I don't think I really took much of it. I would just take a tiny sip.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. So continue about your special day.
I'm trying to remember. I know I got. that was the other thing. I don't know if this was ever an everybody thing, or it probably was the hymn book when they would like
Yes.
give you a new hymn book and everybody
Yes.
signed it.
I think that's what they did during the hymn sing upstairs. I think they passed it around.
Oh, okay.
And that was when you graduated to the big boy hymn book from the little baby hymn book.
Yes, yeah, it was a full size hymn book,
Yeah.
and I don't remember if that was also when I got my like grown up Bible with the wide margins. I feel like I might have already had it then. I might have gotten that for like my 13th birthday or something. Like,
Yeah, that could also be like a birthday or Christmas for a Christadelphian.
yeah. Because when you're a kid, you have like the kids' Bible that has the red lettering for Jesus.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and some of the kids' Bibles even had pictures in them. Mine didn't, but
I had a kid's one that had pictures, and then I graduated to like an ESV translation because I wasn't
Ooh.
big enough for the King James. And
oh
then,
really?
And it was pink, so
Oh, cute.
it was you carry around. It was just hard to keep open. I wanted that leather bound. I was ready for that.
Oh yeah, no, I had a leather bound one. My kids' one was leather bound, and it had my name in
Ooh.
gold lettering.
Oh my
on the
goodness!
front. Yeah.
You're giving me like only child vibes here. What? That
Well,
is
I'm
fancy.
the oldest. I kind of
Oh.
similar.
Yeah, I was the youngest. I was getting the hand-me-downs.
Yeah, you're getting the
and
hand-me-downs.
and my sister had a matching green Bible. Like mine was just like run of the mill. Everyone's getting one.
Oh man. Yeah, there are some advantages to being firstborn, of course. Yeah, so I'm trying to think what else that day. I mean, I feel like it was just a regular memorial service, but it was my first time getting the bread and the wine, and yeah, everyone just kind of giving you extra attention and making you feel special, and like similar to that Bible school high, like you felt like high for a bit, like yay, I'm at my spiritual apex right now. And then, 3 days later, you have some impure thought or whatever. And then you're like, oh no.
Damn it, I'm still human.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't been saved.
But it is sweet that, like everyone comes up to you and like gives you hugs and encouragement and writes sweet messages that you get to read in your hymn book and stuff like that. Like that is really a sweet moment, you know, to experience with that community that you've been a part of for a couple of years and they like know you.
Right. Yeah. And at the time it was really special to me. It was an important moment in my life. I think it's hard looking back now because I have thoughts like, I have thoughts about it from like an adult perspective. But it's like in the actual moment that all that was happening, it was all good. It was all happy. I will say the one thing is that I felt a little disappointed that I didn't have some kind of spiritual experience because I really was like, oh, maybe this is when that's actually going to happen. Yeah. And it didn't.
Wasn't there like a dove that came down? Was that to Jesus
or
John the Baptist?
That was John the Baptist, I think.
Yeah. I was trying to remember which one. I just remember it was like in the New Testament for sure.
Right.
But like I feel like you're kind of expecting that moment of like, I'm having this connection with something heavenly.
Yeah, like a beam of heavenly light is going to shine onto you and you're going to be like, yay, I'm connected.
Yeah, instead of like the cars honking outside, you're like, no, like I'm going to hear this angelic music, that no one else can hear. It's just me. And I'm like, oh, good. I've been accepted. This is my path.
Right.
And so what's fun here too is that you kind of have this transition moment. So this is where everything in the church with their expectations of you, how you interact with it, often responsibilities around it, even how you dress changes because at that point then you are now a member. As you said, you got your lace head covering from your grandma.
Yep.
And so at that point, I imagine you started wearing it every Sunday, right?
Oh yeah. Yes, of course. And that was another thing which maybe we'll get a lot more into this when we talk to Amy in a few weeks about like sister stuff.
Sneak preview. We have another episode in the works. Heather's coming back, which is also part of why she's one of the first guests. Actually, the first guest. So I'll say that.
No, but the head covering thing. I mean, that's a whole thing we could talk about for hours probably. In Morristown and like in my family, the only time we really wore the head covering. Well, I shouldn't speak for all of Morristown, I guess. For me and my family, the only time we really wore it was Sunday morning for memorial service. Maybe Sunday school, but
I don't think people did for Sunday school. I think maybe a few that really wanted to show that they were like the most pious there.
The pious, yeah.
It's kind of like a virtue signaling thing.
Right.
Like, look at me.
Yeah. But like I know when we would go to Bible school, there were some women that would just like have them like permanently affixed to their heads, and we weren't like that. Like I only wore it on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, I know that at times, and I'm sure that, war conversation, however intense it is, I don't know, continues to pop up here and there, and different groups have some different views on it. Because I remember hearing that we are both part of a group called the Amended Christadelphians who follow what's called the Amended Statement of Faith. And there's another group, which is confusingly called the Unamended Christadelphians, but apparently they were the ones that made the change. So that's where I'm like, wait, didn't they amend their beliefs? All right. But I remember going to some memorial services at an unamended church and they weren't wearing them.
Yes.
And then you would have the other people in the amended side who are like, you should wear them for Sunday school and memorial service, not just the memorial service. And so there's a scope there of like that wide ranging amount of views on the head coverings. But generally, I think you are the most moderate view. Like, yeah, I'll wear them every Sunday, but only for the memorial service, not every day, all day.
Right. And then there were some people that would like freak out if like at Bible school or something, it was like, they're going to say a prayer for the meal and they'd be like, I don't have a head covering. And they put like a napkin or a paper towel on their head or something to like cover themselves. And it was like, all right, calm down.
I kind of forgot about that. Yeah. Some people get or had very strong concerns about it. And they really anytime there's something like really religious happening, like the prayers, not like you could sing a hymn without it, but if you were praying to God, you should have it on. Right. And if you were listening to memorial service, you had to have it on. But maybe if you're listening to like the Friday night presentations, you don't have to have it on.
Right.
Like a Bible school. It was like you had to like grade everything by how intense it was, like emotionally and
like how close to God you were getting.
Yeah. How close to God are we getting here? Like I want to know so I can pack my head covering. Do I need one to share with my daughter?
Right.
I will come ready. We need to be ready.
Yeah,
Jesus is watching.
Spare.
Yeah. Honestly, I always had spares. I just had a bag full of head coverings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, after I got over the lace head covering, I just kind of kept that one in my bag in my Bible case as a spare, and then I would use like different scarves and like I would try different things. I never really got into like hats, but I would always do like
You know that
scarves.
was your grandma's game. You
Oh yeah,
couldn't
she
beat
had a lot
her
of
at
hats.
that.
Yeah,
They
that's
matched
true.
her outfits. She had it
She was
nailed
styling.
down.
She
Yes.
did. Yeah. Thank you for remembering her that way.
That's my strongest memory of her right now.
Meanwhile, I remember your grandma crocheting.
Yes.
Crocheting through everything.
I still have the most beautiful blanket that she crocheted for me.
Oh, nice.
It is enormous. I don't know what happened. I don't know if you will let me have one moment to share how amazing her blanket is, or if you need your moment, that's okay. But let me just say it. This was her 11th blanket she had crocheted, as far as I know, for like all of her grandkids and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the most enormous rainbow. Not even symmetrical, just completely like, I don't know, she like freehanded it. Everyone else had like a square and she would pick like one or two colors. Mine was a freaking rainbow. It had like lavender in there too, like any color she wanted. And it was so stunning. Could not fold it symmetrically. Absolutely loved it. I would say it's a chaotic oval if you really wanted to give it a shape, but there are no smooth edges. It was wild. So very talented. Thank you for remembering my grandmother that way.
That is so cool. I'd love to see a picture of that.
It is somewhere. My mom kept stealing it because she loved it so much, and she would put it on the couch as a decoration because she thought it was so pretty.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds really cool.
Oh, it's the best. Maybe we'll put it on the social media and people will be confused why a crocheted blanket from 30-something years ago.
Yeah. They'll be like, is this a head covering?
It would be cute as like a mini head covering if there was like a small version.
Maybe you can make one.
I knit, but maybe if I feel like I want to make some chaotic ovals, I'll figure it out and just grab every color I can find of yarn. So any other thoughts? I feel like that's like the biggest hallmark of differences between the men and women in the ecclesia, you know, and at that point you're also a sister. So you were Sister Heather.
I was.
Because you take on that title upon baptism.
Yep.
So did you take on any of the like womanly duties that they have there of like helping prepare the bread and wine and helping prepare food at the luncheon? Because there's kind of like a list of recommendations that women can pursue to show that you're volunteering and committed to your ecclesia.
I played the piano for Sunday school, and I started out with Sunday school, and then I played for meeting a couple of times.
Wow, that's a big moment.
Yeah, that was my kind of my pride, I guess, to be like, I can play the piano. And I feel like I only knew like maybe half a dozen hymns.
I think that was the norm, honestly, because I lived with two women who got piano lessons, and one of them did the same thing, basically, and they were playing piano for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was fun. I enjoyed that. I don't think I was ever like actually officially on the roster to like prepare the bread and the wine or the food, but I would help because my gram she did the bread and wine a lot. So I think sometimes I'd help her, but
okay, I could see that.
Yeah.
But you were also kind of young. It wasn't like you're going to be like buying stuff. Like you don't have a job yet. You know, you don't have your own ride to get there.
I didn't have
a
car. I couldn't even drive. Yeah, no. Yeah. No, I just did the piano playing. But you know, I did want to talk about something interesting, baptism related, and like male versus female. Okay. So going back to what I mentioned earlier about how there was 3 of us in my Sunday school class. So my mom was actually our Sunday school teacher. And when the aforementioned young male got baptized and became a brother, the arranging brethren told my mom that she couldn't teach our Sunday school class anymore because basically he like outranked her, you know, as a brother. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I know. I wanted to make sure that story got in here because
you're showing her some justice. You're like, you did dirty to my mother.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, here's the real backstory of everything. You're like, I got to tell this story. No, I believe it though, honestly, because I've seen so many times there would be like a women's group meeting, and so there'd be like 12 women all gathered together, and then like someone's husband comes like bumbling in to use the bathroom, and they're like, "Oh, Brother Thomas, you're here. Could you please open with the prayer? None of us women could possibly do it since you're here." And so then he's like, oh, okay, like, thanks for bringing us together safely and blessing this circle of women. Okay, bye. And like he'll just wander out again. Yeah. And they'll be like, okay, now we can talk. And like,
Yeah.
I've seen that so many times. Like, you know, I'm obviously being a little silly, but
no, but it's so true. It's like
it's
all of a
true.
sudden, like, oh, there's a male presence in here. Well, a baptized male, a brother.
Baptized men, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but
But
it was like instant. Like the minute he was baptized, they're like, all right, we need a man to come teach the Sunday school class. Meanwhile, he's like freaking 13 years old. He was a kid.
Yes.
You know?
He was, yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of this. And I mean, part of, I think, for me, I'm really interested in the history, and so I'm going to be doing history episodes. It's interesting that this religion developed in the 1800s, and it has an 1800s patriarchal structure. And it's not that surprising, but it's so stark to see it continue to play out in the modern day, where women have equal rights, you know, equal financial opportunities in general. You know, you can own your own bank account, have your own credit card, things that you couldn't have had in the 1800s. You know, if you passed away, all of your stuff went to your husband. If, you know, he died, like, you couldn't have it. It would all go to your son. It was all about the men. You couldn't do anything without a man in your life. So they kind of, like, there was always someone that was going to marry you because they couldn't do anything without a man.
Right.
And especially in the church. And I mean, there's only like that one verse by Paul about it, but they just will always bring it out and be like, well, in the Bible, it says that women aren't supposed to speak. And it's just wild to watch it play out now. Because like you said, it's just like a man walks in, they're like, oh my God, stop everything.
Yeah.
Like, he is here.
Yeah.
We don't need to stop. Because, you know, any old person, like anyone, like, you know, you got like a teenager who's coming in like a little hungover, and they're like, hey, can you go up and say the prayer today? Because, you know, we've got this room full of women, but we only got 6 guys and we need you to tap in. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'm more qualified than all of these women who woke up at 5 a.m. to read their Bibles before coming here. Like, I'm the one. And so it's really not about, like you were saying, like the knowledge. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about experience. It wasn't about training. Because I mean, he hasn't had like training in public speaking, research, you know. I'm sure he had very limited amount of, you know, books that he had read on theology in general, but most specifically Christadelphian theology views. So I do feel bad for your mom getting done dirty, but I'm sure, like, I would be shocked if there's any Christadelphian woman here who hadn't seen that and witnessed that kind of displacement and subjugation almost, like kind of being pushed to a lower status.
Yeah. I mean, that was what those of us that were brought up in that religion, that was what we were taught. Like, you defer to the man always.
Okay, so did this boy who was your peer all these years, did he start teaching the class?
No.
Like, that you're a Sunday school teacher now. You've graduated. You're baptized. You're done.
No, they recruited some other brother from the ecclesia.
So awkward.
And that's the thing, is like, my mom is a good teacher. Like, that's like that actually ended up being her profession.
Wow.
And
like, she was qualified.
She was qualified to do the job, and she was
objectively.
good. Like, I mean, you know, we enjoyed having her as a teacher, and then they replaced her with this other guy that, you know, was kind of boring. Like,
yeah, but you know, he's a man though.
He was a man.
Obviously, you know, better than your mom. Like, wow, that's kind of almost like humiliating almost for her.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember her being upset about it. Like, I don't remember talking too much about it. Like, I remember her explaining to me why she wasn't going to teach our Sunday school class anymore. And I remember her being sad and like hurt, I think.
What an impression on you as a young girl.
Yeah. I think that might be like where maybe the beginning rumblings of my like dissatisfaction.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, like that might have been like the seed being planted right there, because I was like, wait a second.
Well, you're finally getting old enough, I think, where you're starting to see stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's not just, you know, they're giving you candy at Sunday school and you sing songs and you play and make crafts with your friends, you know, like you were talking about your childhood. Like, once you join, it sounds like you're starting to see things differently that you didn't really see and experience before.
Right. Yeah, you start paying more attention, because like you're right, when you're a kid, it's all fun and games and crafts and like fun Bible stories. Like, you don't really hear
it's just Daniel and the lion's den over and over.
Right. And the Battle of Jericho and the walls coming
the bread
down.
And fish. Yeah, there's a handful.
Yeah, all the parables.
Samson and Delilah.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a top 10, like a track, like a little thing.
David and Goliath.
Yep.
The creation story. That was a good one.
Always fun. Yeah. Jesus walking on water, maybe.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then in the 10 Commandments, you can't forget Moses. Come on.
Right.
Noah.
And Jonah and the whale.
Yes, the whale. Everyone loves the whale story.
And Joseph and the coat of many colors.
Yes, just like my grandmother's blanket. We
Yes,
love rainbows.
that was the inspo there.
Yes, maybe it was. Who knows? Maybe she was just like, well, I've got a lot of kids. I'm just gonna make one of them like act like Joseph. This is my Joseph child.
Oh, that's true.
Are you you're the youngest? I'm the youngest.
Oh my God.
We just had a moment. I am fulfilling prophecy. Heather.
Wow.
Whoa, things got too deep here. And I promise I'm not high. I don't know what just happened there. Oh man, we know our Bibles too well. I was like, I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the story.
One.
I'm the chosen one. The Bible is finally coming true. Yeah. There we go.
The prophecies
There's your answer, everyone.
Have been
prophecies fulfilled. Yeah, they're being fulfilled right before your eyes.
Oh man.
Okay, but thank you. And as you already mentioned, we are definitely going to talk more about gender on this podcast. We already have a very special guest who you've already name dropped. And so she's going to be coming on. We're going to have all three of us together doing a very special episode. So stay tuned for that. Do you have any other memories that you wanted to share of your life while you're in the Christadelphians? I know that you had said am I allowed to say that what you were reading to prep for this podcast? Because you haven't mentioned it yet, I don't think.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
You texted me that you were reading all your old journals from your childhood. And I was like, wow, you're really setting the bar really high, where it's just like doing this research, deep dives, confronting your younger self and all of their awkward cringiness. And I was like, thank you. That's a lot. But I was curious, like, if you found any fun little nuggets that you don't want me to miss while we're chatting.
I have to admit, I didn't read all of my journals because that would have taken a lot of time. And it's honestly
so you're a writer.
Yeah, I have journaled since I was like 9 years old, 10 years old. So I've written a lot of things, and I have not read every single thing in preparation for this because it would just take way too much time.
Okay, understandable. But the fact that you even opened one up for me, I'm very flattered. Thank you for the effort.
Well, I wanted to clarify a few things because like it's crazy. Like after 20 years, you don't remember things the way you thought you. Like at the time, things seemed so important and big in your life, and then 20 years later, you're like, oh, what year was that I did that? I don't remember.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of your life, it's really changed, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and it blows my mind that it's been 20 years because there's a part of me that feels like it wasn't that long ago that I was in that world. And then there's another part, maybe more than one part of me that's like it feels like a different life. Like I don't even feel like the same person anymore.
Yeah, I think that's understandable. I think a lot of us feel that just regularly. Like, wasn't COVID yesterday? And then you're like, wait, that was
I know.
Years ago. It's like 5 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's like various other stories I could share from my childhood, but like, I don't know. There's nothing really major. I guess, growing up as Christadelphian, I did feel a little bit separated from my friends at school. Like I felt like we were like the chosen people or like we were special somehow. And so I think that did impact my ability to like connect with people outside of Christadelphia. Like I kind of had maybe a bit of a superiority complex because of the way that we were brought up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I didn't face any of the internal struggles that a lot of people in like the ex-Christadelphian Facebook group have shared. Like I haven't had any abuse or any issues like that. Like it was pretty good experience for me as a kid.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Good to know. Obviously it's unfortunate for the people that have experienced that, but thank you. So I guess at that point we can start talking about what the process and experience of leaving was like for you. What you were feeling, when you feel like it really began, what it looked like for you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, my family moved up to Vermont, and I was about 16, 17 years old when we went up there. And basically at that point we were living in isolation, which is what they call it when you're not near like a brick and mortar ecclesia.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not regularly going to church on Sunday because it's too far, basically.
Yeah, and like we did have the Green Mountain Ecclesia, which was basically three families, and then there were some families from the Springfield ecclesia in Vermont, which was an unamended ecclesia. But
so that's scandalous if you associate.
We did some mingling there. Yeah. So that was another like, crack in the wall or whatever, where it was like, I became aware, because I don't think before that, I was like vaguely aware that there was unamended people, but I didn't really know any of them. And so like, then we started interacting with unamended people, and it was like, wait, they're just like us. Like, why don't we break bread with them? Like, why are we separate? And of course the whole head covering thing too, that was another thing that we got like kind of lax about up in Vermont, was like, oh, we don't have to wear head coverings because it's just us here. Like, I don't know, we kind of got away from that.
Yeah, when we went camping, we were the same way. Everyone's like, whatever. We're not holy here. We're dirty. We're very, very dirty, we're dirty camping.
Dirty people. Yeah, so there was stuff like that. And then I guess just like, for me, like being in Vermont and like being in this like beautiful natural place all the time, like I started realizing that I felt more spiritually connected to like, I don't know, a higher power or like a source energy or whatever, like in nature, than I ever did sitting in a dusty, hall, right?
Once you saw those babbling brooks, you're like, that's where I want to be. It wasn't the baptismal tub. It was the babbling brook.
No, it was the babbling
mountains of Vermont. Vermont is very beautiful. If anyone from out of the country has never been, it is one of my favorite states in the U.S.
Yeah, it is
beautiful.
It is a magical place.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like, I started to get like really more into like nature, and I remember in like my high school, one of my English classes, I learned about like transcendentalism, and I do know that I wrote in my journal, I was like, if I wasn't a Christadelphian, I would want to be a transcendentalist.
Honestly, are they even still a thing? Is that like, I don't think
so. I mean,
I thought that was like historical.
I was reading like Thoreau and stuff,
that checks out.
Yeah, but I was like, I like the vibe they're putting out. Like, I'm down with this. And
philosophy, right?
Yeah,
man, I gotta Google this stuff. I didn't know this was coming. I didn't prepare for this.
Well, I'm not really prepared either. I'm just remembering that I was like, at the moment, I was like, okay, I feel this. Like, I'm into nature, and like, we're all one, like all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I was also like, but I can't be that because I'm Christadelphian. Like I still wasn't like making a connection that I could leave, like I was like, I can't leave.
You didn't give yourself permission to. It was just not an option.
Right. Yeah. So I would like kind of got into other spiritual type stuff, but then I was like, but I'm not going to do that because I'm a Christadelphian,
Aww.
So yeah, and that was like when I was like, I don't know, 17 probably.
Makes sense.
But I was still I would go down to Meriden because my best friend that I met at Bible school, she was part of Meriden. So I would go down and stay with her on the weekend, not every weekend, but some weekends, or we would go to like, there was all kinds of like CYC weekends throughout the year that I would go to. And
that are basically events for anyone that's like adolescent to teenage age, generally like the age that people are getting baptized or starting to take on more responsibility in the church. That's kind of geared towards them, and generally mingling and socializing before everyone couples up and settles down in an ecclesia somewhere.
Yeah, and it's also like to couple up. You go to these weekends to try to find.
That's the real point. We all knew that,
of course.
Right? Like,
yeah, that's what I was there for.
It's basically what the modern dating method is. Like, they don't use an app. They just keep sending you away for the weekend to live in these little like ramshackle camps all over.
Huts.
Or just sleep on some random person's floor for a weekend. They'd be like, oh, you and 5 of your friends are going to sleep on this person's living room floor who you've never met before. And you're like, okay, cool, we're going to have a sleepover.
Yeah.
And now you're best friends with this person, and now you'll say hi to your new Aunt Jan, who you've never met until today, and will never see again for the rest of your life. And be like, okay, cool, thanks for the pancakes.
No, that reminds me, I was a bit older. I was in my early 20s at this point, but I went, I think it was Attica we were going to, like, it was up in like Michigan or something.
I never went to that one, but I remember a brief period where people were going to Attica. Yeah,
it was like a hot spot at one point. But we got there like a day early or something like that, and we had to stay at these people's house. And by the time we got there, it was really late, and I was directed to go into this room, like a I don't know, like a spare room or whatever, and they had like a fold out couch, and there was already a girl sleeping on like one side of it, and I would just had to sleep next to her, and I knew who she was. I knew who she was. Like, I'd met her at Bible school, but I wasn't like friends with her. And I just remember it was like the most awkward thing, like just laying there in the night in the dark next to this person that I like barely knew.
I can't imagine also being her and just waking up to someone crawling into your bed and you're just like, I hope it's a woman. Like, I hope it's someone that's a Christadelphian. I hope it's, safe. Like, I hope they warned her, like, hey, this girl from Connecticut / Vermont / all over the Eastern Seaboard.
This East Coast girl is coming over.
This well-traveled young gal with her head covering in tow is coming to sneak into this bed with you at midnight. Hope you're good at sleeping through interruptions.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, that was the other thing about being Christadelphian was like anybody else that was Christadelphian was automatically safe.
Automatically have a pass. They are good people.
Yeah.
They've been washed their sins away by the Lord. They're obviously good people. Yeah. God has chosen them.
But no, I mean, you basically would like go to anybody's house and they're like, oh, if this person's a Christadelphian, then it must be fine.
Yep.
And I mean, thankfully for me, it was like I never got into a terrible situation, but like I could see how that could be an issue.
I'm curious about who will come on the show, but I'm sure at some point there will be someone who will tell a different story. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. 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 So anyway, where were we? We got a little bit off track there.
We were talking about the process of you guys leaving. You guys moved to Vermont and you threw your head covering to the wind.
I threw my head covering in a babbling brook.
Yes.
No.
Watched it float away as you read your transcendentalist meditation stuff.
Yes. Yeah. As I meditated in nature.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess like while that was going on, I guess my parents and the other family that was part of the Green Mountain group that we actually lived in their house with them while we were building our house.
Which is very generous.
I mean, Christadelphians, it was safe.
That was very nice of them. I will say it's very nice of them.
No, they're an awesome family, but I guess that they and my parents, they were having like adult conversations, outside of my knowledge, where they were kind of, I don't mean like dirty adult, I just mean like grown-ups.
No, I just have no idea what this means, so I'm just waiting for you to
I saw your face and I was like,
what were they talking about that you couldn't hear?
No, they were talking about like the patriarchy within Christadelphianism and like that kind of stuff. Okay. And but cool I wasn't. Yeah, no, but I wasn't usually really privy to those conversations because I was out and about doing my own thing.
Yeah, the adults were still separate, even though you were baptized. And that's another weird thing. You were still not allowed to join in like that generational conversation. Like all of those people that were like 20 years older than you, they will never really let you in until you've been in long enough to like married prove to yourself. Yeah, or married. Mm-hmm. So that's another status bumper to get. It'll shoot you right up there.
Right. I mean, I guess I did overhear some of it, but it was also just because I was like out and about doing my thing. I wasn't sitting around with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so little did I really know at that point that they were kind of, I think, having their doubts and like kind of, talking about, I don't think they were even talking about leaving at that point either, but it was more just like, well, hey, we're up here away from everybody else, so we can kind of like do our own thing.
Yeah, because as we mentioned, we were both surrounded by family. So that's another level of peer pressure I would imagine that they were experiencing, of people who know you and have opinions about you.
When we were down in Morristown, for sure. So being up in Vermont was kind of like away from all of that. And then, I mean, what I remember of that was that like our Sunday morning activities they kind of got like a little bit less regimented. Like at first we would try to have like a traditional memorial service the way that we did in Morristown, but then it was kind of like, sometimes it was like, oh, we'll just do some Bible readings and we'll talk about a Bible story and then we'll do the breaking of bread. Mm-hmm. And then after a while it was like, oh, well, that family would be like out of town or something. And it was like, oh, well, we're just not going to do it this morning. It's fine.
Ooh.
Yeah. So there'd be times where we wouldn't do it. And then, when I got a little bit older, I actually moved down to Connecticut because I wanted to be close to my BFF. Aww. We rented an apartment from a Christadelphian couple in Meriden. Yep. And then I was like in the thick of it with Meriden. Like I was going to all the things, Bible class, Sunday school, CYC.
Back in the swing of it.
Yeah. So then I was kind of like not really aware of all the stuff that was going on in Vermont. Like I didn't really realize that my parents were pretty much like leaving. They weren't really. Yeah.
And you're still just kind of in the traditional, I don't know if I would say deep, but like in it traditionally, showing up multiple times a week potentially.
Yes.
Committing a few weekends every year, probably still going to Bible school.
Yes. Yeah, I was still doing all those things at that point because I was also still pretty focused on like the next step in, my my life, which was to like find a good Christadelphian guy and get married. And, the whole like process was, you get baptized and you find yourself a Christadelphian partner and you get married and then you have kids and the cycle continues.
Yep. Must be a Christadelphian. Yep.
Yeah. So that was kind of where I was at that point, and I wasn't really paying attention to what my parents were doing, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you were at an age where you could be more independent. Because how old were you at that age when you moved out?
I think I was 19, I think.
Okay, yeah. So you were able to be on your own, and
I was an adult.
And they probably trust that, like, oh, she's with Christadelphians. Obviously, they're all good people, as we know.
Yeah. I don't remember them really ever being like, are you sure you want to keep being a Christadelphian? Like, it was, they kind of let me figure that out for myself.
Which is probably like the healthy view, honestly. Just like let her find out what she wants to do, see what works out for her.
Yeah, I think it was good. I mean, it's also like just goes to show how extremely non-confrontational everyone in my family is. Like, we just avoid topics rather than address them.
Okay, we love your mom. We can see that she's human. It's okay. She's a good teacher.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that was that would have been early 2000, the year 2000, that I was down in Connecticut.
The millennium, Y2K.
The millennium. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Y2K. That was another thing. We had Y2K in Cranston, actually. I was there.
Yeah, you were there.
I don't remember the wine, but I remember being there. I don't
remember the wine, but okay.
I mean, it was a long time ago. But yeah, so I guess at that point I was like pretty in it. But then I remember I would get so like, I don't want to say like, I don't want to say I would dissociate, but I remember going to meeting, going to Bible class and just sitting there and being like, oh, like, I just like, I didn't feel like I wasn't feeling it, Yeah,
I remember when one of my cousins admitted, he's like, who else? He said it in front of our entire CIC. He's like, who else knows how many ceiling tiles long this building is? He's like, who else has counted them across and down this entire building to know how many ceiling tiles there are? And we're all like, whoa, someone finally said it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever paid attention to that. I was a doodler, so I would just be like doodling and drawing or sometimes writing. I'd like bring a notebook and it might look like I was vigorously taking notes on the topic, but I was actually being like, don't forget to stop on the way home and get more bread or whatever.
I had my knitting. Pretty much everyone had to find a way to try to keep themselves from being bored and falling asleep. So for some it was ceiling tiles, for some it was doodles, for some it was giant rainbow blankets.
Right. Yeah. Or I would just like take a journey into my mind.
Yeah. Just daydream.
Use my imagination.
As long as it's nothing dirty, it's okay, I think.
No, it was usually like, what am I going to do after this? Or like, what do I need to do when I go home?
Just planning.
What do I want to do tomorrow? Yeah, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
So first of all, I should say, if anybody wants like a really detailed description of my leaving, they can look at my blog, because I did pretty much outline from soup to nuts, as people say, the process, because I feel like it took me a while. Like, I feel like I had my doubts and I kind of drifted away. I started dating somebody from work who was not a Christadelphian. Yeah. And that became like a huge thing. And at the same time, like my best friend that I had moved down to be with in Connecticut, she also met a guy at work, but she successfully converted him.
Oh, wow. Flirt to convert worked.
Yes, it worked for her. But that also put like a lot of tension on our relationship.
Yeah.
And she was really not happy with me, dating somebody that wasn't converting.
Oh, that's why.
Like there was a lot of pressure with that too, because it was like, why don't you ever bring him? Yeah, she did it, so why couldn't I do it?
Ooh, that stinks.
So there was a lot of tension there. And at one point, like, this is where the scandal starts happening. No,
I'm happy to hear it. Come on. Oh, my God.
I know, I got to add some
and
pizzazz.
As you said, you wrote it on the blog, so I'll be happy to link the blog for anyone who wants to read it.
Yeah, that'd be great. No, so, she and I were renting this apartment together, but, like, we were, like, kind of miserable. Like, we didn't spend any time hanging out together. Like, I pretty much, like, tried to avoid being there when she was there with her her boyfriend, because I don't know, it was just awkward. There was a lot of awkwardness. And as I didn't really know, I still struggle with confrontation, but like back then I did not know how to like have a difficult conversation with anybody.
You said it wasn't modeled in your family, and I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't very common. just
I was going to say, I feel
group,
like that's a Christadelphian thing, I think. Like, I don't remember ever having, it was more just like you were submissive to your elders or to a brother. You didn't really
have to conform.
argue.
So why would you learn to speak out when your whole job is being able to get along with everyone and not rock the boat? That's the goal.
Yeah. So that made it really hard in that relationship because we really did need to have some serious, difficult conversations, but it was like, well, maybe I'll just run away from it instead. So I ended up moving in with the guy that I was dating, which is Dave, the same guy that I'm with today. Yes.
Aw. Oh, I was wondering actually, how long you guys have been together.
We have been together for a long time, over 20 years. But the first couple of years were rocky because I was like trying to get him to convert, but at the same time I was also like, well, maybe we don't want to do that. Like I kind of went back and forth with that, and he was never open to it. Like I was like, why don't you just come with me and like see what it's like? And he was like, no, I don't want to. Like I'm not interested.
You never went?
No. Because
wow.
So he was raised by an evangelical family.
Whoa,
And he got out of that. Like even when he was like 13, he was like, I am not into this, right? So basically as soon as he could, he got out, and he was like, I mean, it would be like us now, meeting somebody and then going, oh, come to church with me. You'd be like, no, thank you. Like there's not even a little bit of me that wants to see that. So
not any of that. No.
Yeah.
As soon as they say take your Bible out, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. So like I totally respect that he was, not gonna just coddle me and go with me and get my hopes up.
He was being honest. He was having hard conversations with you. It's like, this is uncomfortable, but I like you the way you are.
Right.
You can go as much as you want. I'm just not going.
Exactly.
I'll be here. Let me know what else you need. I can clean the apartment while you're gone. But
oh my God, were you in my house at that time? Because that's pretty much what he did. I mean, I
just know he's a good person.
Yeah.
I've seen it. He's a good guy. And you guys are still together after all this time. Obviously, good guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I moved in with him, and that was a scandal, let me tell you, because I got
especially even 20 years ago, especially. It's still a big deal.
Oh yeah. It's not embraced. I got letters from people that were like, they're like, my daughters look up to you, and now you're setting a very bad example for them, and I don't even know what to tell them, and blah blah blah. And I was like, well, they don't have to know where I live. Like it was living in a freaking apartment. It wasn't like I was in a house and like inviting people over. Like it was out of sight, right? Which I mean, not that makes it like it's okay,
none of their business, perhaps.
Yeah,
where you live.
So at that point, I stopped going to meeting, and I kind of like I stopped going for a little while.
Okay.
And honestly, like, I really think if 9/11 hadn't happened, I probably would have left sooner because 9/11 happened and I got so scared because I actually happened to be out in Oregon with my friend and her family that were Christadelphians, of course, because that was all the people I knew.
It's across the country, so I assume you flew.
Yeah, we had flown. We flew to Oregon. Yep. We were there. We were actually supposed to fly back on the 12th. So it was like literally the day before we flew back. Yeah. We woke up in the morning to this, and then like her family, they were Christadelphians, so they were like immediately everybody's like, this is a sign of the times. Like this is a sign.
He's coming. Yeah.
Jesus is coming back. And like that night we went to like a friend of their, like another Christadelphian family, and had like a Bible.
They did like a service.
Yeah, they did a service, and everybody was like excited. Like they're like, this is it. Like finally, like
my God.
You know what I mean?
Whoa, they're hyping it up like
they were.
It's our moment.
And I was
like, disaster has struck. Let's get together.
Party.
Yeah, let's get the wine shot.
But yeah, so for me, like basically all of my programming from childhood kicked in, and I was like, oh shit, like I better get back on track.
And I like that you're like, there was nothing traumatic about my childhood, and then you're like, disaster struck, and all of the panics set in.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is like I didn't really see it as bad during my childhood, but now as an adult I can look back and be like, oh, I was conditioned
to react to, I guess, like
to
global
disaster.
disasters
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Those were considered signs that we had to look for. So
Yeah.
everyone would watch the news and react very strongly to them.
Yeah. So that kind of like, I guess, set me back a bit, because then after that I was like, well, I guess I should probably like try to go back. And
but you didn't like break up with him or anything, which would have been like the big step, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what they wanted you to do, I would imagine, is like move out, break up, come back, move in with like an old lady that's part of the church, who could watch over you.
Yeah, it's funny because like looking back at it now, I'm like, I was basically living like a split life. Like I was trying to do the Christadelphian thing, but I was still living with Dave, and we moved into a different apartment, which I just told everybody it was my apartment. Like I didn't let on that he was also living there with me.
Oh yeah, definitely double life now. You're
scandalous.
Now you had sins.
I did have sins. I did have sins then, but I was able to go every Sunday and wash myself clean with the breaking of bread, right?
Yes, that wine washed you clean, the bread washed you clean, something like that. Yeah.
Wash me clean from my...
We're not at Christadelphians anymore. We're not experts on that anymore.
I don't know how it works. So then, I don't know, I kind of like hemmed and hawed for a little bit. And I went so far as to like go to another Bible school. Okay, so actually, so Dave and I
Was it Shippensburg?
No. Because the last time I went to Shippensburg, I had already started dating Dave, and I had like a horrible time. Like I think I was already kind of like out the door at that point. And then going there was like, I think part of what sucked about it was a lot of my friends that I'd had from growing up, they had all started like paired off with each other. So like everybody was all of a sudden like acting like grown-ups instead of, teenagers.
They weren't fun anymore, basically.
It wasn't fun. Yeah, it wasn't fun. No, but I don't know. I guess at that point, I kind of saw how much I had kind of veered away from it, I guess. And that was like an eye-opener going to Ship. So then that was when I kind of stopped going to meeting. And then it was right after that 9/11 happened. So then I started going back. And then Dave and I actually did break up. Because of that, because I was like, I need you to be a Christadelphian. Like I need a Christadelphian husband, whatever.
Yeah, your good Christadelphian conditioning kicked in. That was
so we did break up. And I actually I met this Australian guy online.
But was he a Christadelphian?
He was a Christadelphian. So naturally, totally safe and normal to just invite a random Australian man to come to the U.S., stay at my family's house for a week or 2 weeks. I don't know. It was a couple of weeks.
That's a great first date idea. Just lock them in with your parents. Nothing could go wrong.
Yeah. I know. And my family was like, what the hell, Heather? Like, you can't just invite a random man here. But
okay. But you act like, I'm pretty sure when my cousin started dating an Australian, she brought him down from Canada, and I think he stayed at her parent's house for like a month. And I was like, what kind of first date is that?
That's Christadelphian dating.
Right. Everyone in Christadelphia is like, okay, like, what's the problem with that?
What is the problem? That's totally normal.
Like, we have a spare bedroom. Like, why wouldn't we have this random Australian in our house that we imported across the border? Like, it is fine.
It's totally fine. Yeah, so I met this random Australian man online, and we had like an online relationship for, I don't know, a few months. And then he came to the US. I picked him up at JFK. I drove him down to New Jersey. We stayed at my grandmother's house the very first night that I met him. My poor, like, I don't know how old she was, 85-year-old grandmother, like, sure. And
I never knew this. This is so funny.
Actually, yeah, I did not write about this on my blog because I don't know.
And I also read your blog so long ago. I did not do all my homework.
It's okay. I didn't write about this particular incident on the blog.
I think I would hope I would have remembered this because this is wild.
I should
write it.
Yeah.
Your sweet grandmother too. I want a picture of her next to him towering over her because she was so cute and little bitty.
Yeah, and he was tall, as most Australian men are, right?
Somehow most Christadelphians, I don't know.
That's true.
So many, at least around me.
Yeah, so I was just like, sure, come to my grand's house. It's totally fine. Like, we went to Ocean City with him. Like, then I drove him up to Vermont, and we hung out at my parents' house. And then we drove to the Niagara Bible School, which is in St. Catharines, Ontario. So, like,
I never went to that one. Okay.
Drove across New York State into Canada with this random man.
Well, I mean, he's got a passport. Just bring him across the border. It's fine.
Yeah, but there were not fireworks with that relationship. It was kind of like my last ditch effort, I think, to be like, there's a Christadelphian man that could potentially be my future husband.
Mm-hmm. You gave it a shot.
I gave it a shot. But yeah, the chemistry was non-existent there. So, and then also at that Bible school, I volunteered to teach a children's class with my best friend. So we taught like a children's class. Like I was like, I'm a Christadelphian lady right now.
Whoa, everyone thought she was going for it. She brings a man around. She's teaching the kiddies. They're like, okay, she should have a child in 2 years. Like we can start the countdown.
Yeah. And so that, just for the record, if anyone's keeping track of dates here, that was the summer of 2003. And if you'll recall, I said earlier that I resigned in the summer of 2004. So that was literally like my last attempt. And then when that...
But this is years in the making.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
it was a timeline. You were close to leaving in 2001, when September 11, 2001.
Yeah. Yeah. So I basically spent like the next like 2 years hemming and hawing and going back and forth between like, do I want to stay? Do I want to go? I don't know. But yeah, after that, I think I was just like, you know what, this is really not for me. And that was also when I started having basically like panic attacks. Like I wake up on Sunday morning.
Really?
Yeah. So at that point I had my own apartment in Meriden.
With no Dave
in it. Although we were still like really good friends. Like we still hung out all the time. We just didn't live together. And we were like not dating at that point. But I would wake up on Sunday morning and I'd be like, oh, like I do not want to go, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one time I called him, and he's like an early bird kind of person, so he would always be up like doing the laundry,
kind of people.
Yeah, doing groceries in the morning. So I remember I called him and I was like crying, and I was like, I really don't feel good. Like I don't want to go, but I have to go. And he was like, you don't have to go. He's like, if you really want to get close to God today, why don't you go for a hike? He's like, I know you love hiking. He's like, why don't you take your Bible up to the top of Chauncey Peak, which is one of the hiking spots that I loved doing.
That's so sweet.
He's like, you can go up there and pray and read your Bible if that's what you want to do.
So supportive.
Isn't that like...
I love this.
I know.
That is like the sweetest thing
Isn't
you
it?
could do to support a struggling, Christadelphian at that moment. To be like, the choice is yours, but maybe take care of yourself and do what you love, but also like find the middle ground.
Yeah. No, he's been amazing for me because I need that kind of a cheerleader in my life.
Because it sounds like you weren't able to push yourself to set that boundary to take care of yourself. It was still, I have to do what I have to do, is what it sounds like was running through your head. Like, this is an obligation.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, I mean, again, in hindsight, it's funny because it's like I didn't have any roles to fill there. Like I wasn't playing the piano. I wasn't bringing the refreshments. I wasn't doing the bread and the wine. I wasn't doing anything. I would just be there. But it was also like, I was really worried about what everybody thought of me. That was another big thing with the Christadelphians, I feel like, was the appearance of like, are you a good, upstanding sister? And part of that was showing up on Sunday morning, in your Sunday best, on time with a smile on your face. So, and I was just like, I tried, I was doing it, but I was like, not liking it. And yeah, so he was, he gave me that advice. And so I went, did my hike, and it was a beautiful sunny spring morning. And I was like,
oh, I'm so glad you did.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'm a transcendentalist. No.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I guess things get a little funny too, is that then I was like, okay, I'm going to leave. And I started telling my Christadelphian friends, I was like, I'm going to leave. And they're like, you really shouldn't leave. Like they, they're like giving me all
what do we think we were going to say?
I know, of course. But I was so naive, I feel like, that I had these like idealistic thoughts that my friends were going to be like, oh yeah, girl, you do you, you take the journey you need to take. No, they were like,
they're not Dave. Dave would have said that.
Yeah. But no, they were like, please turn your Bible to, whatever.
Yeah, here's a list of verses to change your mind and to make you comply.
Yeah. So I think that was part of the struggle, was I kept talking to these friends that were Christadelphian that were like, if you leave, you're throwing your life away. You're going to be eternally damned, blah, blah, blah. And that was the other thing too, was like, regarding Dave, they were like, he's just a man of the world. Like, he's not going to be by your side forever. Like, he'll probably leave you in a few years, or, like,
ouch.
I don't know. Like, yeah, like that's just
I think it's more that you would dump him because you're going to get whisked away to the kingdom, and
that's true. He would be left behind.
Yeah, you'd be the one leaving him.
Well, yeah, except that like you weren't supposed to be unequally yoked. That was the other thing.
That is the term. We are only oxen to the Lord.
Yes. Yeah. So that they were basically like, encouraging me to move on from Dave and find somebody in the Christadelphian world.
I mean, I love Dave.
I know.
So I'm so glad you did not listen.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I can't even imagine what my life would be like if I had not listened to myself or listened to him.
maybe also with our social media, we'll just post you next to a brook on a mountain. And just be like, Heather's in her happy place. Listen to our episode and you'll understand.
Yeah, there's plenty of pictures of me in poses like that I can send you. Mountaintop poses, streamside poses, whatever.
You having your best moments, you having your spiritual moments. Yeah, that's okay. I think that's a beautiful version of spirituality.
Yeah. No, that's definitely my spiritual language is nature.
And it's cool that you were able to find that and he saw that in you and encouraged it because that's what felt right to you. And how did did you stop having the panic attacks around that time? Now that you were committing to leaving, was it after?
Yeah, I think so that was the other thing. So that was probably like in the spring or maybe early summer that happened. And then I spent that summer kind of not like avoiding going. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to be in Vermont this weekend, or I'm going to be here or there, or whatever. And I was always like doing things so I couldn't come on Sunday morning. Like that's another tactic to be like, I'm going to go visit so and so and then be somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll definitely be at a different ecclesia that weekend.
Yeah. So then it was August and I was like, okay, I'm going to freaking do this. Like I got to do this. And it felt like a milestone for me to be like, I'm going to say that I'm leaving. I'm going to make it official because I've been hemming and hawing for so long that people are just like, what are you doing? So I'm like, I'm going to make it.
We're circling back to the letter.
Yeah.
Right? Was that how you did it?
Yes. And I wanted to put it in writing. I guess again, in hindsight, I'm like, why did it matter that much? But I guess I wanted
you were a writer. You were journaling. That was your language.
I do feel like I
expressed yourself.
I do feel like I communicate better through writing than any other way. But I remember writing
to a podcast.
Yeah. I guess I'm doing okay so far, right?
I think so, but whatever. I don't know. It's my opinion, my podcast. So I think it's great. Keep going.
Thank you. I remember I wrote this in my journal that I felt like I needed to make a list of all of my sins and tell them why I couldn't be a Christadelphian anymore. Thankfully, I didn't. But that was
awful.
Don't
do that.
That's how bad. That's how bad I felt about myself. I felt like I was just such a bad person. Yeah,
because you couldn't live up to their standards,
right.
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a lot of self-loathing. There was a lot of just feeling less than.
This sounds terrible, for you, the amount of stress you're under to start having panic attacks and all of that.
Yeah.
And that you looked for support from the, other sisters in the ecclesia, it sounds like predominantly, and that they really weren't giving that to you. They just kept giving you more of what you already had. They're like, yes, you need to believe this. This is important, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I know this. I've been coming here for 20 years.
Right.
24, right? When you left.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't need to hear that. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm going through a really hard time and I think I'm finally figuring out what spirituality looks like for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like then it sounds like you had to kind of unpack some more layers that you weren't expecting at this point. Because a lot of the stuff you haven't mentioned so far in the podcast, the self-loathing and stuff,
mm-hmm.
It's interesting that it came out through your mental resistance, and it wasn't it was intentional resistance. It was just your natural thought process, and it kept pinging things wait, this stuff about gender is not right, but it's okay, but it's in there, and it kind of starts as this abrasive kind of thing, and it keeps going I don't want to be here on Sunday, but I can't think about it, but I keep thinking this, and then I feel it sounds like it's kind of piling all of these little negative things that you experienced or felt or thought, the things you were trying to hold in. And now it's all coming out, and now it's so messy,
mm-hmm.
is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and another thing that was happening consecutively was that my one of my siblings was coming out gay, and then a few years later, when I was really around the time that I guess I'd already left, but I was still in touch with some of my Christadelphian friends. Mm-hmm. They came out as trans, and that had a huge impact on me as far as looking at things from the Christadelphian perspective is well, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. That's wrong, whatever. But then again, going with my gut feeling and how I felt about things. And I was no, this actually makes a lot of sense. And and I love my sibling, and like I'm not going to turn my back on them, and I'm not going to shun them, and I'm not going to, do all these things, because that was like conversations I had with. This is after I left, but I still kept in touch with some of my Christadelphian friends. And one of them, I remember she was like, I went to a Christian bookstore and I looked for like information about what the Bible says about like gay and lesbian people and like transgender people. And I was like, you don't think it's going to be a biased source? Like, come on.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to want to read that book. I'm just telling you, don't waste your money on that one.
Well, yeah, she was going to read it herself and then like tell me why it was bad or whatever. But I was like, I don't want to hear it.
That's like, so much better to have her interpret it for you.
Like, I don't need that. I don't want to hear it. So that was another thing that was like not matching,
It sounds like at that point you realized that what you actually believe and feel is right in your gut is different than what mentally you have been taught and understand is what is supposed to be true and correct and the right thing to do and feel and think. Yeah. So I'm trying to think what else. Well, I guess this is on my blog too, but I also had a good friend that was Christadelphian, and we spent a lot of time together in the years, like, well, right before I met Dave, he and I hung out a lot, and we were kind of like deconstructing with each other. Like we both were still Christadelphian. We still like went to things, but we would like go back to his apartment after and be like, I don't know, like talk about things and be like, I don't like this, or like, this doesn't feel right, or whatever. Like real open conversations about it. Yeah. Because now it sounds like you guys were tired of just saying, yeah, everything's fine and nodding along and then going home and not thinking about it. But now you're actually like, wait, let's talk about this and be real. Yeah. So he was actually like one of the people that I could actually have like for real conversations with and not be afraid that I was going to get in trouble or that he was going to recommend tell on you.
Yeah. Or recommend a Bible verse for me to read or whatever. So
like judge you and be like, you clearly need this. Yeah. Like you need to learn this lesson about whatever.
Yeah. So in like the year before I left, he started dating and actually got engaged to a woman that was not Christadelphian. And he already had like, I think this is where my listing of my sins comes from, because he had already like had a couple of like strikes against him in the ecclesia as far as like behavior, like, and again, this is like so silly. It was things like
scandals,
like he went to a casino and gambled, and like I forget like what the other thing was, but like I don't know. He basically got on the bad side of like the powers that be
of sin.
Yeah, no, he was. So the crazy thing was that we had a meeting, like to decide whether or not he should get disfellowshipped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like they really probably physically made a list that they read in front of everybody, didn't they?
They did. Yeah. They did.
Whoa.
And so I attended this meeting.
Whoa.
And all the while I was like, I already had like my foot out the door at that point, but I was still trying to keep up. Yeah. And that was another thing that left like a really bad taste in my mouth. And I was like, strike, I don't know, 27 or whatever at that point.
Did they like wait for him to leave the building and then close the door and be like, shh, we're all having a meeting?
No, he wasn't there. Like it was a special, I think it was like Saturday
after. Did they call
it
and just not invite him? They called a special meeting? Oh.
Well, they called a special meeting, but I'm pretty sure everybody was invited, and I'm pretty sure that he was invited too, and he could have gone and like stood up for himself.
Yeah, I don't know if it's better or worse to be there.
I think he was probably like, F all of y'all, and like not, because
don't let the door hit you on the way out kind of thing. And like, whatever, I'm done with this.
Yeah, but that was really awkward because first of all, I was like, knowing him the way that I did, I was like, well, I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to be part of this group anyway. So like, go ahead and disfellowship him. But then like the following Sunday, or maybe it wasn't the following, like a Sunday after, his father gave an exhortation and he was pissed. And I remember like sitting there, I was sitting in the front row for some reason with my...
Yeah, why?
I don't know.
With your notebook doodling. Yeah. And you're like, look at her, I can see your doodles from here.
Well, I was sitting up there with my BFF at the time. And I remember he kept like glaring at us and like, saying that we were hypocrites and like... It was
like calling you out, like
not by name,
looking at you,
not by name, but insinuation.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, when you're in a small group like that, everyone kind of knows when someone's saying something and they mean it for someone in the audience.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Oh,
I'm sure after this, people are gonna be like, yeah, you should never listen to like audio files by people who aren't Christadelphians, and we'll be like, they didn't name us, but.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what they're talking about.
I mean, I feel like I've dropped enough hints that anybody that was in Meriden at that time is going to be like, oh, I remember that,
Yeah, well, now they're going to be like, oh, shit, maybe we shouldn't have just talked about disfellowship and that guy. Now everyone knows. Whoops.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was like a weird thing. And I was like, okay, I don't want that to happen to me. So maybe I should just skedaddle before they decide to disfellowship me.
I was never in a conversation about disfellowship. The ecclesia I was in was, I feel like, considered to be a little bit more on the liberal side, whereas I remember some ecclesias were like, if you miss like 3 Sundays in a row, you're on the list to get cut and like disfellowshipped.
Oh, wow.
Was like, I don't know, like, I just kind of heard that from people. So I don't know that like that was a hard rule or if I'm just being more dramatic. I really don't know. I just remember that never happened where we were. You could be gone for 6 months and we'd be like, oh, hey, okay, we'll add you back to the attendance list. We kind of put you at the bottom because you haven't been here in a while, but okay, cool.
Yeah.
And like, it was fine. Like there was only one meeting I can think of that was close to that. And I wasn't there. It was just an AB meeting. Like it wasn't the whole ecclesia shit talking someone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this was like everybody that dared to show up on a Saturday afternoon.
Which, I mean, now you're committing your whole weekend, so.
I know. It was a downer of a weekend, I'll tell you.
But man, the gossip vine after that.
I know. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that was awkward. Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, you want to move on to like what I did after post Crystal Life?
Yeah, that definitely covers the leaving. It sounds like it was definitely a long-term process, really. You covered, I don't know, like 6 years or something in there between when you first started recognizing signs that something didn't feel right, it didn't intellectually feel right and aligned with you, but like the relationships weren't working out. You were having more successful relationships outside of Christadelphia. You found that the lifestyle wasn't an exact fit for you. You're making decisions for yourself and you're starting to figure out who your people were, what you believed, what felt right. And when push started coming to shove on different issues like your siblings' gender identity and sexuality, that started to become a big thing. And then having, that your friend there going through that and having this disfellowship conversation happening, again, pushing you to choose sides almost.
Yeah.
And you keep feeling in your gut that it wasn't with them. It wasn't hurting the people you cared about over and over. You did. I'm sure there was a hard conversation with Dave when you broke up with him to be a good Christadelphian, but I'm kind of, personally, I think it's nice to hear that you did not do that to your sibling and be like, oh, I'm a good Christadelphian, I can't.
Oh, yeah, no.
See you as a sibling anymore.
Yeah.
Or to your friend of like, well, the ecclesia doesn't want you there, so I can't have you in my life anymore.
Yeah.
Or like, I'll send you a Bible and you need to learn to read it better because you're a bad Christadelphian. Like, kind of like the shaming. So I think that, that's good to know. So thank you for sharing your story and being the brave one to be the first one on the podcast. But also, like, you did share it on your blog years ago. So, and I remember you sharing that with me when I was new and trying to start deconstructing and figuring out my stuff. So I'm glad that your story will help others just like me who are trying to figure it out. And, we're all in isolation here, where often it's hard you're not really going to meet just like an ex-Christadelphian on the street very much. Like, you're not really going to like bump into each other. You kind of have to intentionally look for each other and connect. And, that's why I'm glad we connected online to, reconnect, and you shared your blog and then joined the Facebook group, a group for ex-Christadelphians. So that's all been awesome. And, the last kind of part of your interview I want to go through is kind of all of your reflections on that and anything we want to offer to other people who are going through or have left the Christadelphians. And at this point, it seems like you don't regret having left. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. No, I like from the minute that I hit, put that letter in the mailbox, I was like, a weight had been lifted from me.
Wow.
It was the right decision for sure.
Okay. Because I feel like even today I was reading some stuff in prep for the podcast, and there was, the stories of Christadelphians telling people who say they're leaving, you're going to regret this. So just want it on the record, not regretted. And how many years later?
Regrets.
20 years later now?
20 years later, no regrets.
20-year anniversary, no regrets.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't you tell me a little bit about like how your life has changed, some of the positives, because it's complete. You've had to create your own story. You got off that path where you were supposed to just marry a nice Christadelphian, live near an ecclesia, have some Christadelphian babies, teach Sunday school until they're old enough to get baptized. And so you kind of made your own life. So, anything that you want to share about your life, you're able to, or if you just want to focus on, changes you made around your spirituality or what you found most helpful after leaving, any of that would be great to share.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I will say that it wasn't, I did say like it was a weight lifted off of me when I wrote that letter. And it was a relief, but it was still hard especially the first couple of years, like transitioning away from Christadelphia, because I was kind of naive in thinking that I could still be friends with everybody and I could still like socially interact with everybody, but just not have to go to meeting and do all the Bible related activities. And I think they kept it up with me for almost a year because I think they were hoping that I would come back. But it was
there
like,
may have been a motive there.
Yeah. But then, and so I was kind of like blissfully like, oh, this is amazing. Like I can go over and have dinner at your house and I can play with your kids and hang out and then it's all good. And then, and I did write about this pretty in detail on my blog. I basically got dumped, a year later. They were like,
wow.
They basically were like, you have to decide. You have to choose between the world and Christ. And if you choose the world, then, we basically can't associate with you anymore. So I basically got like dumped. Yeah. So that was
by
really
a whole religion.
By a whole, yeah. And
a whole
like,
ecclesia, really.
When I felt like they were my family and it was all of a sudden like, bye, we're not going to associate. So that
was also like a real like false promise there where they're like, oh yeah, you can come over for dinner anytime. Happy to have you. And then they're like, why didn't our dinners convince you? Like, what the hell? You weren't supposed to just enjoy the dinner. You were supposed to read the Bible and change your mind.
Right. Yeah. So that was a bummer. And I wrote about that on the blog, so I won't get too much into that. But I guess like what, the positive things for me were like, I all of a sudden realized I could like do whatever I wanted to do, like all the things that I like when I was younger, and I'd be like, well, I would do that if I wasn't a Christadelphian. And
okay, but like what kind of things?
Well, I know
it's not like robbing a bank.
No. I was going to say it wasn't like I went and like did illegal things. It was more like, I don't know, just like getting involved in the community around me, like
Okay, that's a delightful option. That's like, the sweetest option that could have come out of that.
I know, like
I wanted to help my community.
I'm such a dork, right? No, but it was
were you like Miss America? Like, were you feeding homeless children immediately?
Yeah, pretty much. No, like I remember, like
good for you.
I went on this thing called Earthwatch, which is like it's like a eco-tourism kind of thing where you can take a trip to places and you help like do something environmentally related. So I did that.
I kind of did that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. I joined the art studio that was in the town close to where I lived. I went back to school and finished getting my degree because that was something I had started, but then I was like, whatever, I'm just going to get married, so who cares?
Yeah, and my husband needs that.
Yeah, my husband will take care of the money. Yeah, so I went back to school and finished my degree, and I basically all the different things I did, I was making connections along the way. I've done a lot of like volunteering types of things. One of the big ones was volunteering for an organization that supports people that have the same syndrome that I have. So they have like a conference every year. So it almost like, for a while there, it almost like replaced the Bible school experience because it was like
that is kind of interesting. It's like this big gathering of people for the same cause, all the same common shared interest kind of experience.
Yeah. So that was cool because I got to meet a lot of people that way. And then like, it kind of had that vibe of like every July I'm going to see you at the conference, whatever. So I did that for a while. And that was actually what started me on the blog journey. Like I started writing about my experience with that. And then after I had pretty much like dumped all that out there in public, then I was like, oh, I should write about my Christadelphian experience. So that was kind of where I got started with the blogging.
Your origin story.
Yeah.
And then I'm also curious what your relationships were like after leaving, because like you were saying, you kind of replaced the community with that large event, but what about other stuff too?
So really the first like major thing I did was going back to school and being in college. And I did find it kind of hard to really like deeply connect with people because I was like, I think I was afraid of getting hurt again. Like I was afraid of getting dumped. And I also was like, I also felt kind of like like a newborn baby out in the world. Like I didn't know how to like interact with people that weren't
like
Christadelphian. Yeah.
You had never been taught to do it. It was never important
Exactly.
to do.
Yeah, you just had like a natural community your whole life if you were brought up in that. So it was like, how do you make friends? Like I had to kind of, I mean, honestly, I'm probably still struggling with that because I'm still like, I'm just still always like meeting people and then I'm like, am I like a dork? Do they not like me? I'm not sure. Like I still have a lot of like self-doubt in that area, but but no, I've done a lot of things over the years. You know, like I wanted to be a better public speaker. So I did Toastmasters for a few years.
Cool.
Which is, that's a weird thing to do because it's not religious at all, but they have a very regimented format to the meeting. And it kind of reminds me of like a memorial service where it's like you have the presider that like opens the meeting and then you have like somebody gets up and they read a quote and then somebody gets up and tells a joke. And I know it's like kind of similar to like the layout of the Christadelphian meetings, which I think if I remember correctly, there's something called Robert's Rules of Order and it's like for running a meeting. And I think the Christadelphians use that. And I think that's the same thing in Toastmasters. So there was a little bit, like there's been a few things that I've done or been involved in where I kind of have these like little moments where I'm like, ooh, that's weird. Like that reminds me of Christadelphian stuff. And sometimes it's like, I really don't like it, but
yeah, it sounds like it wasn't a positive from the vibe I'm picking up here.
No, I loved Toastmasters in general. It was just, there were moments.
No, I mean the vibe that you felt with, like it felt like you were kind of sitting with something uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah. It's just like, I was like, oh, this like very strict way of running the meeting kind of reminded me of that. But yeah, so now we live out in the country, so I can have my spiritual, natural moments whenever I need to.
Great.
I'm part of my town's garden club. I'm on the pollinator pathway, so I'm like trying to save the pollinators and get people to plant more native plants and not use pesticides.
Yep.
I'm in a book club now, so like that's kind of my vibe that I curate now is just like, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a reason we're friends. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Like pretty much everything you share on social media, I'm like, yes, girl, yes, I agree.
Yes. Show me more of your plants.
Right, your
Let's
plants.
See how your garden's doing.
Your books. What books are you reading?
Yeah. It's been fun to find so much in common. That's not religion.
Yeah.
I think like we've connected over not being Christadelphian, so we've never actually like connected over something like, yeah, like this is beliefs about stuff. It's really just like lifestyle, like where we've realized who we are and the things we enjoy overlap so much. And it's nice to have that be the common ground.
Yeah.
And kind of explore having relationships that are just on shared interests and different sorts of things, you know, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things we also agree on. But for this podcast, we're mostly talking about religion. So that's why it's just like, it's nice to explore having friendships outside of religion.
Right.
It's not just that.
Yeah. And like doing things other than just like the routine of like every Sunday we go here, every Friday night we go there, every Wednesday night we go there. Like it's, you know.
Yeah, like congrats on the book club because now you're not reading the same book for the rest of your life over and over and over and over.
Right.
That's the only one you should read.
I know.
Now I'm just like,
how boring.
Yeah, I can read so many books. I read like dozens of books a year. Yeah, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Every one of them's new and different, and I get to find out something new. And no one has ever been circumcised in any of them. No one has ever just run in and cut someone's, off and given it to a king.
Right.
Like, it's great. Like, people fall in love, people go on adventures, people make up, people fight, like all kinds of things happen.
Yep.
You know, it's great.
Yeah.
And I prefer that, I would say.
And if you're reading it and you don't like it, you can just stop reading it and put it away.
And no one will judge me. No one cares.
Yeah, it's great.
Like my library just wants me to return it. That's about it. Like that's the only obligation I have.
Yep.
And maybe my friends will want my opinion sometimes if we're reading the same book or something. Well, thank you. Have there been any things that you've actually kept of the Christadelphian beliefs or like lifestyle or anything that you've integrated into your life, or if you kind of feel like you've kind of dropped most of it, like that you're consciously aware?
I don't know. I feel like maybe there's still like a shadow or something of the Christadelphian life in me. Like but not intentionally. I think it's just like the programming that I mentioned earlier. It's like it's there
like in the back of your mind.
Yeah,
I think it's there. Yeah.
I do think growing up Christadelphian, because there was so much emphasis on like the intellectual side of Bible study, that I tend to be really skeptical of like everything. Like I feel like that was another thing we were sort of programmed, was to be like, anything that's not Christadelphian is wrong, or, you know, they have to prove it to you or whatever. And so I'm just like,
without offering that themselves, like, you can't be skeptical of us.
Yeah. So I just feel like I have, I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I just don't believe things easily. Unless,
I think that's probably healthy, especially after having tried to be that.
Yeah, like there's no way I'm gonna like be sucked into a cult or anything. Because anything, even like I said, the Toastmasters thing, like even the little meeting order, the vibe of it was kind of like, I'm like, am I okay here? And I'm like, okay, I am. And that's the thing, is like also listening to myself and my intuition, and like in moments where I'm like, this guy is giving me creepy vibes, it's because he's a creep. You know, like it's like there's a reason for our intuition. And it's like, I feel like as a Christadelphian, that was always like, oh, don't listen to that. Like, go look at your Bible, or like, what does God want you to do? Or what is this brother over here telling you to do? And don't listen to your own intuition.
I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like I had the exact same experience when I left. Was I had to start listening to my intuition, and I realized how much I hadn't, and how much that had hurt me. Yeah. So even it feels like it just took away a major protective mechanism.
Yes, definitely.
Me. And it sounds like it's still continuing to protect you. Like, you're recognizing that as like, oh, this situation doesn't feel quite safe, whether it's a person or a group or a place or whatever, and it's triggering you to get out. And you recognize that you had been taught to kind of not listen to that. It was always what other people say, what the group says, and not what you feel.
And on that same note, I feel like now I'm able to stand up for myself too. Like if I am in a situation that I don't feel comfortable, or I don't feel safe, or I don't like the direction it's going, I can get up and walk out, or I can say something, or, you know, I can do whatever is appropriate for the situation. Whereas back then I would have just, you know, stuffed all those feelings down inside, and I would have, you know, just had to bear with it, whatever it was.
Yeah, because there's always that peer pressure and everything. You know, you couldn't just say something. There was always that inhibition, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was explicitly said, but everyone kind of knew it, you know? It was the culture of it.
Yeah.
So, that's good to hear, because it sounds like a really good and healthy change.
Yes, definitely.
I was curious if you had any other positives that you wanted to share, like when you look back about your experience, like.
Well, I guess one of the things I didn't mention was, I know one of the questions you had on the list was like, did I ever have like a strong faith? And I think when I was a kid, like a little kid, and you believe everything that your parents tell you, right? You believe. And so Santa and Jesus, the Easter Bunny, all the things. But like for me, that was actually really helpful, I think, because of the condition I was born with. I had to have surgery, and I had medical treatments and things like that as a young kid. And a lot of times I was really scared, or I was worried. And so feeling like I had God like with me, or like watching over me, and I could like pray whenever I was scared, I feel like that was helpful. Like, I don't really know, like I've thought about this. I'm like, I don't really know what my childhood would have been like if I didn't have that. Like, I don't know if I would have had some other sort of higher power that I would have felt compelled to.
Well, I also wonder if your parents would have been different too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they would have.
Because they were also relying on that for comfort and strength and all of that kind of stuff. And you were especially vulnerable being so young. Yeah. And having to go through all of that. Yeah. So that makes sense.
But that was the thing too, is like, then I would be like, well, then why is God letting me, or why did God let me be born this way? And why did God like choose for me to be born this way and have to go through all these things? Like, that was another question where,
it's not like it's fair.
Exactly.
You know?
And I was like, what did I do to deserve this? Or what did my parents do? And, you know, there was always like those kind of questions. So I guess it was good and bad, because it was good in that it gave me a sense of security, or a sense of comfort.
And then you read the Bible about how your grandparents' sins will go down through the generations. And you're like, well, I guess my grandfather was
a sinner.
Jerk. Yeah, he was so sinful that now I have to deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dichotomy there, but...
So it gave you strength kind of early on.
It gave me strength.
Having faith made you maybe feel less alone.
Right, exactly.
Like you could get through it maybe.
Yeah. And that was something too, like after I left, that was an interesting thing to adjust to, like the whole journey afterwards of like, I kind of like dove into atheism for a little bit. And then I was like, no, that's not for me. And then I dove into some other things. But like, I mean, I never really came back to believing in like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so I don't feel like when my grandmother died, I was like, I don't know. I felt like I wanted to pray or something, but I was like, but I don't believe in that anymore. And I also was like, and what happens to her now that she's dead? So like, I mean, that's a huge other conversation, but.
Yeah, a little bit of feeling lost because now you don't believe in that, but what do you believe in? It kind of opens that new door where you're like, oh, shit, I got to think about this.
Because you can kind of go along for a while. If things are going well in your life and you don't feel like you need to like pray or think about life after death or whatever, you're just like, whatever, I don't believe in any of it. And then when something like that happens, you're like, oh, wait, now I kind of do have to figure out what I believe about that. So.
Yeah, everyone kind of has to come to terms with morality and their beliefs about if there's anything after and what like the meaning of life is and all that kind of stuff. Like, why am I here if I only get like, who knows how long, a human lifespan to live.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a lot of questions for that to be figured out. And I mean, I would like to talk more about all that. I don't know if you want to do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, I don't think we're fitting in tonight. So maybe we'll ask some wrap-up questions. Okay. One would just be, part of this is this podcast was kind of encouraged and supported by people in our group, a group for ex-Christadelphians on Facebook. So what brought you to the group? Do you remember joining or anything around that?
Yeah, I actually joined. So that group has been around for a really long time.
Yeah, I think it was 2008.
Yeah, so I actually joined it at that point because I was on Facebook back then. And I joined so I was one of the early members.
Okay.
And yeah, at that point it was still like pretty kind of fresh. Like I left in 2004, so it was 4 years later, but I was still like getting out of it. And yeah, it was pretty cool to see people from all over the world sharing their stories. And it seems like a lot of times when people share their story, you're like, yes, like I feel the same way or something similar happened to me. So yeah, that's been really a great resource. And I've had a couple people contact me through my blog that have found my ex-Christadelphian posts, and I always refer them to the Facebook group. I don't know if they always join, but that's like my go-to resource for people.
Yeah, I think it's a nice place. I definitely enjoyed being there. It seems like especially when people are really processing, it's good for them to have a place where they can kind of talk about it with people who understand and have experienced a lot of similar things and also gotten through a lot of that, where they've kind of come out from the hardest parts of it and processing it. And for people to be less isolated, because I mean, like we kind of joke around, you haven't heard the intro music yet, but it kind of jokes around about the name that no one's ever heard of and trying to find support when no one even knows what you're talking about. It's not easy.
Nice.
But yeah, so I've really enjoyed that already. So that's cool to hear that you're, one of the early members there. I think that it is most of my questions. I guess one of the last ones is, are there any other resources or anything that you'd want to share for someone who's leaving or has left?
I mean, I was thinking I should do a blog post with like all the books and authors and like blogs and things that I read throughout the years. But I also feel like you kind of just have to like, again, with the intuition, like whatever is sort of like coming to you that feels right for you is like, explore that, like explore those things. Like I said, I kind of tried out atheism. I read like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, and I basically was like, they're basically like Christadelphians, but like for atheism. Like they're that hardcore and intellectual about it.
Yeah, it feels evangelical in some way, but just for a different religion.
And I was like
zealous.
Yes, very much. And I was like, not into that. Like I don't need like answers etched in stone. Like I'm okay with things changing and things morphing over time. So like I don't know, but there are people out there that maybe they were really intense Christadelphians and they want to be intense atheists and go for it. If if that's what's pulling you, then go for that.
Yeah, sounds like you're more in the gray area and you can kind of tolerate some ambiguity right now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like, like Eckhart Tolle is an author that I've read he's like spiritual, but not tied to any particular religion. And I like that. Like, I like exploring those themes, but not having to be like, okay, we got to look at our Bible and, pin down where this thing comes from. It's like,
and saying that you have all the answers.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it took a little while, I think, but I mean, definitely now I'm at a point that I'm okay with not having answers, and like, I don't need hard, solid answers. Like, I'm okay with ambiguity.
Yeah, well, I think that's the more honest thing of saying, I'm open-minded, I think, is in that.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm going to say I have all the answers and everyone else needs to agree with me. And if you don't agree with me, I don't want to see you anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty healthy stance, it sounds like, for you right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think we're wrapping up for now.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I wish we had more time because I feel like there's so much more I want to share, but maybe I'll bust out a new blog post or something.
Yeah. If you do and you want me to share, let me know. I'll be posting this. So when that time comes, we'll see what we put out. Maybe some head covering pictures. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. I'll send you some of those too.
Yeah, it could be fun. Anything you want to share. This podcast is going to be audio only, not video. So if you want to disclose, your personal images or not, that's all up to you at your discretion.
Okay.
But I really appreciate you coming on. It has been so much fun for me. I've really enjoyed hearing your story, laughing with you, and kind of reliving some of this East Coast Christadelphian memories. A little walk down memory lane there for some of that.
Yeah, right.
But I appreciate your openness and honesty with all of that. And I think it's really awesome to see how far you've come in life, that you've made some wonderful decisions. It seems like you're really happy. I'm glad you have no regrets and that you kind of made it through that really hard chapter. And I hope to continue to encourage people who are in those times where they're struggling, where they might be having, panic attacks and stress and feeling lost and like they can't pursue what they want to pursue and listen to their intuition, all that stuff. I hope that they know that it can get better, and Heather's just one of the many people who I hope will be on this podcast who illustrate that. So I hope that everyone takes some encouragement, read your blog, get some traffic on this old, whatever year that was, blog, like 2005.
That's the old blog.
Yeah, we're going to have some flashbacks, get your Y2K gear out and read her blog.
It's not that old. I was a little late to the blogging game, that's all.
That's okay. All right, well, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again on future episodes.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thank you to everyone who has helped make this podcast possible. Today, I'd like to thank Heather for editing this episode, Al Kroons for creating our intro music, and the ex-Christadelphians that submitted audio for the intro music. If you'd like to join our community, you can find us on the group for ex-Christadelphians on Facebook. Or if you'd like to come on the podcast, reach out to me at LifeAfterLeavingPodcast@gmail.com. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a rating and review or sharing this podcast with a friend. That's all for today. See you next time.